and he found that he got really, really good consistency. And he could arrange the pictures in order of scariness reliably every time, no matter which group of people he showed it to. They would always come up with the same result. So it's a bit of a eureka moment.
Hello and welcome to the Test Community Network. Ho, ho, yo. It's Christmas time. This is the 19th of December episode. My name is Tim Millett. I hope you're all safe and well. And whatever you're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks, I hope you are looking forward to maybe some of it, a bit of a break. Some of you probably keep on working, because I know some of you are workaholics, but I do hope that you get some time as we move towards 2025. Can you imagine that? We're nearly there, 2025. Wow, what a year. Okay, so as ever, anything in today's episode that you see, go to the testcommunity.network. You find the resources of the marketplace, which is rich and full of organizations, resources, content, essays, reports, data, anything I find I put into the marketplace, so that you've got a place where you can go and find out anything you need to know about the assessment and community space and people who might be able to help you in your work. And you also got the podcast player, so if you want to listen to the podcast over Christmas as you go for a nice kind of walk, get away from the family, that kind of thing, then I do recommend the podcast player. You could be able to absorb some kind of educational content there, and also you could start event planning. And I've been adding in lots and lots of events for next year. We've got a few to share with you now. We've got people who kind of got themselves warmed up already for January, but there's also some big major events taking place next year. I'll be continuing to add some more over the Christmas break to add that out, but I think we're talking about kind of 500 or so events next year, which is incredible. Anyway, so you can subscribe for free. If you don't do this already, you get a nice little email through once a week, which condenses a lot of the information that I put in here. I'm looking and thinking about what I'm doing for 2025, and hopefully, that might include some shake-up and changes to the way that I work with that. I've got some great ideas there. And events that you want to be checking out over the next few days. So we've got today, if you're listening to this during lunchtime UK time, then you'll be able to check in later for the Danish company office hour session. So you can sit down with Amanda and the team. It's going to be a little bit of a Christmas one, I'm sure. And you'll be able to ask them any kind of psychometric assessment-based questions, and they'll be able to help. I will try and join, but it's always school time pickup for me, so I will try and get there. Badger, I've got a live demo. So if you've heard of Badger, they're a digital badging platform. Ginger and the team, you can check that out. Then after the Christmas break, we have what's coming for AI in 2025, quite a kind of appropriate time to release this one, from the Digital Learning Institute. Cambridge Assessment Network, assessing competence, definitions, challenges, and strategies, a virtual webinar there. We've got the AALHE Professional Development Webinar Series. That starts on the 15th. And we have the Educational Assessment Group. This is Dr. Mary Richardson. She has Eleanor Andressen in talking about vocational, what people think of vocational. I'm actually quite intrigued to see that, because it's a bit of an academic-y kind of podcast. I know Mary's very open to all sorts of ideas, but I'm kind of intrigued to see what they have to say about that one. Content-wise, Ethan Mollock. So if you want to kind of up your thinking about how you use AI in a day-to-day, this isn't necessarily assessment and education related, but this is a great little article that's been put out there that you can check out, and it's 15 times to use AI and 5 to not. So it's worth looking at that. If you're fancying a different job, Alpha Plus, I've got a Director of Technology job on offer. If you do have any jobs that you're going, you want me to share out on here, by the way, for next year, because I know a lot of people will be looking, then please do let me know. We've got a call for papers for APHA conference. We've got a call for abstracts. That's the American Public Health Association. Podcast-wise, we've got the Tried and Tested podcast. That's with Isabel Gontier from PSI, psychometricians through the age of AI, evolving roles and opportunities. Ada Wu. Ada is awesome. You've got two very, very awesome people there. So that's I will be definitely listening to that one. It's a great podcast, that. Then Exam Man, we mentioned this was last week because we had Graham Hudson was on it. This time to talk about exams and metacognition. So it's worth checking that out. So today's highlight, obviously you saw a clip there. I'm talking with Matt Wingfield. We're talking about comparative judgment. So comparative judgment is a bit of a passion of Matt's. It's an area of great interest for me as well, because I built a little tool that effectively does comparative judgment. And I've been kind of in conversation with Matt about it. And in this session, we talked about the origins of comparative judgment, the value, the potential that it has within the space. And we also talked about my kind of tool and the idea of people being able to innovate with AI to try these things out a little bit more kind of hands-on-y, hacky way. So here's me in conversation with Matt. Thank you very much for joining me. Are you well?
I am. Thank you very much. Excellent. And thank you for inviting me along.
Excellent, excellent. So for anyone who doesn't know you, do you want to tell people a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Matt Wingfield. I work as an independent consultant within the assessment market, working with I actually sort of a bit on both sides of the fence these days. So I do some strategic business development support for technology providers, but more recently have found myself doing a lot of procurement support for exam awarding bodies, which I've really enjoyed actually, and it's been really interesting working with a whole variety of different awarding bodies, from health and safety through to insurance and securities and investments. So it's been really quite diverse. So yeah, and historically been heavily involved in the Assessment Association, been involved in that since the beginning, back in 2008. Been chair and interim CEO over those years, and then before that working for edtech providers for a number of years, and started off, I'm going backwards here, but anyway, started off as a primary school teacher way back when. So yeah, been involved in the education space for a long time.
Well, if my career is anything to go by, that will come back around, and you'll probably find yourself back in the classroom at some point, maybe reading stories or something. But yeah, we've both been chair of the Assessment Association, a great association. So anyone out there that doesn't know anything about it, then I do recommend you can join for free. It's a great resource, isn't it?
It is.
And we bump into each other at conferences and board meetings and those kind of things, don't we? And we just got chatting, I suppose, about comparative judgment, because that's, I know, something, that's what we're going to focus on today, and that's a kind of big passion of yours. Do you want to tell people quickly about what comparative judgment is?
Yes. Asking me to explain comparative judgment quickly is dangerous, because I do get very passionate about it. Very in as brief as I can be, comparative judgment, in essence, is where, rather than assessing things individually against a mark scheme, you actually look at things in pairs, and you make comparisons between those pairs as to which is better at meeting the criterion that you are looking for. And actually, if you go back a little way, I'm a bit fuzzy on the dates, and I should know this better, but comparative judgment was the way that we used to assess students' work. That was the default way of doing it, and Cambridge University were the people who came up with this approach, and they used it to assess the students going through the university. The problem became when they had too many students to do this, because it's quite a manual process. So what they used to do is they would sit around a big table, they'd have all the students' work, and all the academics would sit there and they'd look at the pieces of work in pairs, and then they'd put them into a rank order, basically, and that's effectively what comparative judgment is trying to do. But if you've got lots of work, that becomes really difficult. And so the university invented this approach using assessment rubrics, effectively. And we moved into the form of assessment that we know very well today, where we have a mark scheme, and we have a piece of work, and we have an assessor who decides how many marks that piece of work is worth based on the mark scheme. Technology has come along now to provide more effective ways of using comparative judgment. Now, why would you want to use comparative judgment? It's a good question. So the problems that you have, and just to illustrate this, actually, there's the guy who first came up with the concept of using comparative judgment in assessment was a gentleman called Alistair Pollitt, who was the director of assessment for Cambridge Assessment a number of years ago. And he had found a piece of research work, or piece of work that someone called Louis Thurstone had done in the 1920s around comparative judgment. And Thurstone came up with this law of comparative judgment. And Thurstone got very frustrated about how inconsistent people were in making judgments on things. So the example that he used to give was he would present pictures to people of scary situations, and he would show the picture and say, how scary is that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being scary and very scary and 1 being not very scary. And he could show the same picture to multiple people and find that there was huge inconsistency about how scary they thought the picture was. So long story short, he came up with a different approach that said, rather than showing the pictures in isolation, he'd show 2 pictures at a time and say, which is scarier? He would do this process for all of the combinations through the set, and he found that he got really good consistency. And he could arrange the pictures in order of scariness reliably every time, no matter which group of people he showed it to. They would always come up with the same result. So it was a bit of a eureka moment. So if we then fast forward to the early 2000s with Alistair Pollitt, he was getting increasingly frustrated that as markers, humans are not particularly consistent when you come to open-ended stuff. It's fine if it's multiple choice questions where there's just one right answer. But as soon as you put an essay in front of a human or a collection of humans, they'll come up with different marks. In terms of the same essay, there's inconsistency in that approach. And we tried to compensate for that by making the mark schemes more and more complicated. But actually, the root of the problem is that humans are not terribly consistent when you give them a subjective judgment to make.
Yeah.
He thought, well, could we use comparative judgment instead and present multiple pairs of essays to people and get them to organize them into a rank order? He did some work that worked really well and got some really strong reliability out of that marking, and then worked with an organization that I used to work for called TAG, who developed a computer system to do this for you so that you could start doing this at scale with digital work. So in essence, what comparative judgment is trying to do, and this would have been the short response to your question, Tim, sorry, is it's trying to introduce reliability into subjective assessment. It's trying to make deliver greater consistency when you're looking at open-ended pieces of work. And that could be essays, it could be videos, it could be portfolios of work, it could be anything. And of course, those things are becoming more and more relevant in modern assessment, where we're starting to look at trying to assess soft skills and collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, those kinds of things, which are subjective by their nature.
And I suppose one thing you don't necessarily get from it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you won't necessarily directly get a mark from doing the comparative judgment process. You just know where they are in the scale of things. Is that?
That's true, but what that and I always worry about describing the output as a rank, because that has some connotations, better and worse, all of that kind of stuff that people sometimes rankle against in the education space, which I completely get. But actually, all this rank order is a scale, and what the system is doing is putting the pieces of work onto that scale, and they have very defined position on that scale. So whilst it doesn't generate a mark, it does generate a scaled score, if you like, which can then be translated into a mark. But there's a really good real world example of comparative judgment. So I can guarantee that almost everybody on this call will have experienced comparative judgment in their everyday life. And that's where you go to the optician for an eye test. What the opticians don't do is show you a picture and say, how sharp or fuzzy is this on a scale of 1 to 10? They make you look at a picture, and then they do the swapping of the lenses things, which are getting more and more jazzy.
Very electronic.
But basically they're saying which is sharper, and they're giving you 2 comparisons, 2 lenses to look through to say which is sharper, your left eye or your right eye. Through that process, they arrive at a really precise prescription for your eyesight. So comparative judgment, whilst it doesn't give a score, it does result in a very precise result, which can then be translated into, an optician's prescription for your eyesight, or a grade for an assessment. So,
could you, in theory, if you've done that comparison, you've got that list, that kind of rank order, could you then mark certain scripts within that rank order to see what the scores are, and then you don't necessarily feel as though you need to mark the other scripts?
Yes, you could. So there are a couple of different approaches here. So the first is, you could absolutely do what you just described. And I know when I was still working as a supplier of comparative judgment, we did some work with Manchester University, and they did just that. They got their rank order. They took a few scripts on the rank. They scored those, marked them, and then figured out the scores, the relative scores, the relative values, sorry, of all of the others. The other way to do it is that you actually concede the set of, so if you've got a set of new essays that you're putting in, you concede that with scripts that you've already marked in a previous year and have grade boundary understanding of. You can put those into the set, and those can be judged, compared with all of the others in the same way. And wherever those seed scripts end up on the rank order, provide you with your cut scores. And it also is a way of ensuring that your grade boundary, but grade boundaries don't change over time. So, there's this age-old complaint that the media have at the assessment system every year, is that it's getting easier to get an A or easier to get a 9 or whatever it is. Well, actually, if you seed from previous years in comparative judgment, you can guarantee that the A cut point is exactly the same every year. So it's a nice way of doing that.
And I remember when we were talking about this, and I'll show my example in a second, but you were talking, it could be used as a formative exercise within the classrooms, not necessarily the markers using this, but it could be a means by which the students themselves are doing the comparative process.
Yeah, now you're getting me going on formative. Well, another great passion of mine. But yes, I mean, and this is where I get really excited at the opportunity, because one of the age-old problems about education is that we're trying to get students, fundamentally what we're trying to do with our kids as they go through school is trying to get them to understand what good looks like. And the only ways that, I mean, there are lots of ways that we use formative approaches to help them achieve that, but when it comes to high stakes assessment, the usual thing is that we show them the mark scheme, and it may be presented in slightly different ways, but we're effectively picking stuff out of the mark scheme and showing that to the students as examples of what good looks like. And actually, that's a really hard process. Conceptually, it's a really difficult thing for people to get their heads around. And a lot of adults, a lot of markers struggle to understand mark schemes until they've been using them for a little while. So it's unrealistic to expect students to understand them. So what comparative judgment allows you to do is actually, rather than being used as a mechanism for scoring, you put the students in front of the process and they get shown a variety of pairs of different qualities of work, and they say which is better. And through that process, get a better understanding of what good looks like. And there was a really interesting study done a couple of years ago by Purdue University in the States, because they were really keen to see if they could influence better quality work by doing more meaningful formative activities at the beginning. And they took a group of, I mean, I think these students were 19, 20-year-olds in an engineering degree qualification course. And they took half of the cohort and put them through a formative exercise where they used comparative judgment. And the other half went through their more normal approach, which is putting them into small groups and having a discussion around samples of work. Okay, so you had two different approaches to formative. When they got to the end, they measured performance of all of those students. Every single one of the students who had gone through comparative judgment did better than the students who didn't, with one exception, and that was the very best student, the brightest student, actually was one of the group that didn't use comparative judgment. But you could argue that by the time you get to the level of the best students, they need less formative help. But everybody else, regardless of their ability, did better as a result of having access to comparative judgment for formative. So just helping them to get a better understanding of what good looks like.
Yeah, so it's a very kind of interesting area. And I suppose one of the challenges of all this is kind of having the opportunity to experiment and try and iterate. And this is kind of what sparked the whole conversation we had off, because I called you and said, Matt, look what I've built, I'm so excited about this. And I'll put it on stage here so we can see it. But this is I had a go at building a comparative judgment platform. This is using a platform I'm using called Replit that allows you to kind of quite rapidly chat with almost like a virtual development force, an agent-based development force to build solutions. So very simple kind of example here. But what I've done is I've done it and refined it a little bit after our conversation. So we've got some essays that have been generated by AI on a particular topic of various different quality. I've put in the comparison statement, so I want to see if they have a good understanding of the future of work in AI. I'm going to start that comparison. It's going to give me an error. There we go.
Of course.
There we go. And it gives me here then just a quick view, because I think this is one of the kind of key parts of it is how many comparisons go on as part of the process, isn't it? And that's where it can get quite lengthy process, but I suppose AI has the opportunity to remove that part of that process. And I know this isn't a perfect solution to the kind of problem it's going to do. The comparison, it's going to give me results out. This is AI's judgment on that process. But this is where I kind of see the potential for AI to aid and assist, both in terms of taking some of the load as part of this process, but also give us an opportunity to try and play with new ideas, new concepts. So here we are. Essay 1 has come out as ranked first, and I've got some feedback on that. It tells me how many comparisons have gone. I've got essay 2, essay 3, so essay 9 is ranked 3. So it's gone through and put those in an order. So essay number 5, there was no wins at all as part of that process. So it's just a kind of sample kind of tool. But what I love about this idea is that we could then take that as part of the process and develop something else up. So where I always see the challenges when it comes to technology development is that to build something like this, you've got to spec it out, haven't you? You've got to sit down, you've got to find a vendor that's willing to build it. They've got the team's capability and capacity to do it. You've got to try and translate what it is you want to create across them, the workflow. They'll go off and build it, they'll get it wrong. This AI does that. Sometimes it will get it wrong and you just chat away and iterate on it. But it's a damn sight cheaper to get to something like this as a kind of an example that you could then take as a minimum viable product or whatever, or something just as a working prototype to then take to a developer to say, look, this is what we've been exploring. We've done some fine tuning of it. Can you make this into a fully fledged product for us? How much would that be? That would be I suppose a better approach. Do you think?
Yeah, no, I do, and I think you touched on something a minute ago about the length of time that comparative judgment takes, and actually, if you take a view of the overall assessment process, comparative judgment actually doesn't take any longer to do than a traditional approach, because with a traditional marking approach, we get some people to mark the essays, but then we'll also get a different group of people to moderate the results of those people marking the essays. And we do that because of the inconsistencies I was talking about earlier on. Well, actually, comparative judgment sort of self-moderates all the way through because you've got multiple people viewing all of the work and each piece of work being seen multiple times. So overall, the process time isn't any longer. But there is, at the beginning of a comparative judgment approach, there are lots of very quick, easy decisions that people make because the work at the beginning of the process tends to be, it's randomly paired, and you tend to end up with lots of very easy decisions. This one's definitely much better than this one, and you can make that decision quite quickly. And actually and so the human isn't really adding an awful lot of value at that point. And where I see this as a potentially exciting piece is doing that precursory sorting exercise, and then getting the humans in at the end of the process to fine tune the results of what the AI or whatever has come up with. Because I am still, and maybe I'm unduly nervous about this, I am still slightly nervous about letting AI take over the assessment process completely. And one of the benefits that I've always seen of comparative judgment is it's keeping the human front and center in the process of determining the relative value of each piece of work. But we could use AI at the beginning of that process, and that would significantly reduce the time that it takes to end up with a really accurate and consistent result for the pieces of work that we're looking at.
Yeah, or it could even be a bit like that kind of double blind or the kind of double marking side of things. AI could be one of the comparison components in there. So you've got humans working alongside an AI in a kind of augmented approach, haven't you? You've got the fact that it could run through this process and then go through to the almost like a marking process. So it doesn't carry on with the comparative, it then goes on to a human marked piece, but with supporting information that the human then goes through. And I suppose what the difficulty is, what you don't want to do is almost present something to a human marker saying, we've already looked at this one and it looks good. Yeah, because that's going to lead you in terms of your scores that you're going to put in there, isn't it? It's going to kind of, when you frame something as being good, you're going to mark it as being good.
Yeah,
I could see some laziness there.
I think the other problem potentially is that having used, if we think about the big benefit of comparative judgment is we're trying to remove subjective bias in the approach that is inherent within marking. It would sort of be counterintuitive to do the comparative judgment process to do that, and then mark the outputs traditionally, because that would sort of be defeating the purpose of doing them through comparative judgment, because then the subjective bias could creep in, not just from the perspective that there may be inference that actually the CJ tool has said that this one's a really good essay, so how can I disagree with that? But also just because people are different and they would end up with slightly different results. I think having the AI involved blindly in the whole CJ process, and that's one thing that I didn't mention earlier on, but that one of the other benefits of the comparative judgment approach, and it's not unique because you can do this in marking too, is that the whole process is blind. When the people are making their decisions, they have no clue who they're marking, which piece of work they're marking. So if you could find a way of entwining the AI in that process, either just at the beginning or perhaps all the way through, but that the human is still doing comparative judgment and is still involved in that process as well, I think you could end up with a really good quality result, which is time efficiently achieved, and isn't subject to subjective bias as well.
My kind of vision for this kind of work going forward is that when we have these conferences and we get these events and get these experts together, rather than us just kind of listening to what someone's been up to in the last year, and how they've kind of developed something with a vendor or whoever as part of that process, is to actually just get these people together and go, okay, right, so let's redesign the whole process. Let's think about how AI could approach this. Let's have a go at building something, because this kind of thing, on a day-long workshop, could build this in an hour. I think I was watching All Creatures Great and Small when I built this. So that's about, what is it, an hour episode with adverts. So it's the capability to do this. I just think it could just add a whole new dimension to the conferences and events that we kind of run and organize. And the workshops as well. I've done it where I've done a workshop recently where I went in. I did a presentation about AI and the future for assessment, and then we did a workshop. And from that one, we built a multiple choice question generator and a few other bits as well in the space of the room. So I just love it.
You're right, and I think it is really exciting that we can now look at innovating and test, and more importantly, testing innovation out very quickly and inexpensively. I mean, and okay, we've been focused on comparative judgment in this chat, but actually you could do this with lots of different approaches to the learning and the assessment, and just looking for ways that we can utilize AI to enable us to try things out, because there's a lot of angst about AI, isn't there, within the education space? Lots of people worried about how it could disrupt negatively, but actually this is a really good example of how it could disrupt positively and make it much easier for just a classroom teacher, if they want to build a little tool that might help their learners achieve a bit more in a particular area, whilst watching All Creatures Great and Small. It's accessible and it's easy for people to try it out, and I think that's the really huge opportunity that AI does present.
I think it's worth saying that other 1940s dramas are available.
Yes.
You don't have to watch All Creatures Great and Small as doing it. I think maybe it influences you. I was watching something else. I was watching Black Doves, the Keira Knightley thing the other day, and I think it took me in a slightly different direction with another platform that I was building. Anyway, I think, so lots of potential there. And I think, if anyone listening and watching, obviously, Matt, excellent member of the assessment community and expert in the space. So if you're looking to, get someone on board to come and guide you, whether it's the kind of procurement side of things or just steering in terms of vendors and ideas and technology, then I would definitely recommend Matt. And of course, I'm always available as well if anyone wants to do a workshop or something and just explore some new ideas. And I can bring these kind of technologies. The best one this week, sorry, I just mentioned it. I put a post on it today. We were designing a form in my class for I teach marketing apprentices, and I got my student to draw out the form on a piece of paper, kind of map it out, putting their boxes around it, and then we took a photo of the stages of the form, the photos, and put it into Claude and said, build this form. And honestly, it mapped it out brilliantly. Even put the tooltips in there. It got the logic that you put in there, conditional logic, and it was there. It was a working form that we could use and play with. So we don't. It doesn't have to be as all sitting around computers. We can do some big paper-based exercise, as a kind of storyboarding, and start with that as the basis for building these things. I get really excited about all this stuff. Anyway,
we can tell, Tim. We can tell.
Yeah.
And the comparative judgment thing is just to finish. It's not just an aspirational thing. People are using this in anger, and I'm doing a project at the moment for a chartered institute where we're piloting this approach as a different way of approaching their sort of longer, more subjective assessments. Because the other thing that this gives you the opportunity to is to open up the things, the way in which students can demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. So, traditionally, this chartered institute's just used long response essays as a mechanism for capturing knowledge and less so application of knowledge, but knowledge recall. But it really wants to push into the application of knowledge space, which means that students are going to want to talk do an interview or record a video or do a little simulation or a presentation. That can all be done through comparative judgment. So you can have mixed I can't think of the right word, mixed
media.
Thank you.
Yeah.
An essay being compared against a video, or an interview audio file against a PowerPoint presentation. All of that's possible, and it becomes much more equitable because of the holistic nature in which we approach the assessment piece within comparative judgment.
Yeah, I posed that question. I was talking to Rebecca a couple of episodes ago because I'd watched a webinar series or a podcast about option-based assessment. So students in the higher education space having the options to do different forms for their assessment, an essay or a presentation or something. And Rebecca kind of said, well, the scale's always a bit of an issue there when we talk about vocational and anything else. But this is where, agentic space, where we've got reasoning models that are agentic, effectively could take all that load off for you. So, it's AI is making that kind of visual processing, multimodal processing so much more scalable, which is what I find really quite exciting.
I agree. And I've just learned a new word, agentic.
Agentic. Yeah, agents and agentic. Yeah, it's part of the level 3 on the OpenAI steps towards artificial general intelligence. There's a whole presentation for you there if you want to see it. Well, thank you very much, Matt. That's been excellent. I really do appreciate your time, and as ever, enjoy working with you. So, again, if anyone wants to join the Assessment Association, then they can do that for free. Go to e-assessment.com. Matt and I are both board members there. We'd love to see you soon. And thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for that, Matt. That was excellent. Really enjoyed that conversation. Some really just fascinating journey, just hearing Matt's kind of views and thoughts about how comparative judgment could be, just quite a helpful aid in the journey of assessment. And from Matt's kind of point as well, it could be used by classroom teachers in their own time, etc., just to do some initial scoring as a formative tool. I think when I was talking about it with Amanda Dennis, we she was saying, well, why would you not want to score as part of the process? And yes, I kind of get it. It's going to be available, suitable for certain contexts, but there's no reason why it can't be used as part of a cycle, as a stepping stone, really, as part of a more formal scoring process. So thank you very much. So that's it for me for this year. This is going to be my last one. I'm going to share some videos over the Christmas period via the Test Community Network LinkedIn channel. So if you want to catch up on some of the conversations that I've had this year with people, some amazing ones. I think we started this about May time-ish with these, so I think we've had quite a few episodes. I don't actually know where we are now with the episodes. I need to check that. But I hope you enjoy the slightly longer session. Have a wonderful, wonderful break, and I will see you in the new year. I've got an interview already lined up for you, and it's awesome. So I'll see you in 2025. Goodbye.